When you bring together an engineering mind with a creative heart and an insatiable curiosity, the result is the amazing work of this episode's guest. Welcome to Pixels, where we explore the heart and art of photography. I'm Beth Velo, and I'm so glad you've decided to join me. I'm pleased to welcome Jeanie Sumrall-Ajero to the conversation. You are going to experience her as the embodiment of a spirit of play, experimentation, and thoughtfulness. We talk about how her multi-disciplinary background contributes to her vision as a photographer, the role of community in connection and staying inspired, and how we can respond when fear or hesitation make themselves known as we make our creative way in the world. Jeanie's background is as varied as the photos that she takes. She's worked as a software engineer, a massage therapist, an English teacher in Vietnam, a photo restoration artist, which is how she learned Photoshop, and most recently ran a small software business with her husband in the crafting world. Since 2017, Jeanie has put that same creative passion into her photography. Her mission in life is to inspire others on their creative journeys through documenting her own photographic explorations. She lives in the Rocky Mountain foothills in northern Colorado and volunteers her time as a photographer for Larimer County Natural Resources. Jeanie and I also talk about the Women's Winter Photography Conference being hosted by the Outdoor Photo Alliance. That takes place on February 6 through 9, 2025 in Estes Park, Colorado. You can get $100 off your registration fee by entering Pixels100 at checkout. You'll find the link for more information in the show description. Before we move to the conversation, a very special thank you to two important people in this podcast. Alex Armitage is my video editor extraordinaire, and I am extremely grateful for his behind-the-scenes work to make me and my guests look good. He's a wonderful photographer and workshop leader, and he has his own popular YouTube podcast that I've linked to below. I hope you'll give Alex some love and follow him if you're not already. I'm also grateful to Nick Stover of Nature Photography Classes and his Inspired Creator Grant, which is a supporter of this channel. If you have a creative idea you want to get off the ground or expand, you can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspired-creator. Let us know in the comments what was most useful or meaningful to you in this conversation. We love to share and hear about your experiences. And of course, your likes and shares and comments are welcome. And be sure to subscribe so that you're informed of future episodes. Now, let's get to the conversation. Jeanie, I am so glad to welcome you to this podcast. Or to this episode. I heard you on Matt Payne's F-Stop Collaborate and Listen with some of your colleagues talking about the upcoming Women's Photography Conference through Outdoor Photo Alliance. And I'm actually going to be talking to all three of you, but separately. And you're kicking it off, and I'm so glad that we are spending this time together. So thanks for making the time.
Oh, of course. When you messaged me about this, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. I love what you're doing with this podcast.
Oh, thank you.
I love the creativity side of it, learning about how other photographers think, just, photographically, what their philosophies are. And I really love it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I'm starting to realize, once you start out with a particular description of something, and as it evolves, some words become clearer, and I'm realizing that this is really about the philosophical, ethical, and artistic considerations of photography.
Yeah.
And kind of that behind the scenes. And I'm so grateful for photographers like you who are willing to dive into those deeper topics.
I love talking about that stuff.
Yeah, I know. I'm finding all the ones that want to geek out on it, and
exactly.
And it's so fun, and so far people are finding it insightful and useful, and that's also very satisfying. So again, thanks for that willingness to do this. So what's making you smile today?
Oh gosh, I am still smiling from a week ago when my husband and I drove up to Estes Park and climbed up a rock, which was a lot harder than I remembered it being, but it was in the dark to see the Aurora display over Estes Park. And it was pretty magical. And I don't think I would have done it if there hadn't been clouds in the forecast for home. And I was looking for a place to go that was going to be out from under the cloud cover. And I could have gone east to the plains, but I don't have an emotional connection with the plains. So I decided I love the mountains. I'm going to go up there and hope for the best. And it was pretty amazing. So that's what makes me smile.
Wow. There's a couple of things to unpack in there, even as you were sharing that tell me something about your philosophy and your approach, which we're going to get into. And one of those was you didn't have an emotional connection to the plains, so you went to the mountains. And I'm sure we'll get to that. But I just wanted to pull that out.
It's insightful of you because it is a big part of why I photograph.
Yeah. Lovely. And we should say, as we get started, and we'll talk more about it towards the end of our conversation, but Estes Park is the location for the Outdoor Photo Alliance conference. Can you quickly tell us, just so we plant that seed, in a nutshell, the focus of the conference, I suppose, and the dates, and then we will get to more details towards the end.
Okay, so it is the Winter Women's Photography Conference that I am putting on with Shanda Aiken and Martha Montiel as part of the Outdoor Photo Alliance. And it is February 6th through the 9th, 2025 in Estes Park, Colorado. And it's in person and women. So our goal was, because we met kind of at a retreat, we didn't know each other when we met. We put our faith in another person who organized the whole thing. And there were 6 of us, and it was just an amazing week of community, really. And we just want that for other people, because I don't think you get that same kind of connection when you're online. And so we really wanted it to be in person. Your
motivations for this make me think of the conversation I had with Sarah Marino, who I know is one of the speakers that you have.
Yes.
She and I talking about how challenging building community can be within photography circles, and probably even amongst women. And I thought that was interesting in your conversation with Matt. And I'll include links to the interview that you and Martha and Shanda did with Matt. There was some conversation about how, I think Matt was pointing out that men tend to find each other and form community around the photography, but women are a little bit more scattered. And I thought that's almost the opposite of what it is in real life. Like, women are often the ones that are like forming tight bonds and connections, and they're gal pals and all of that. So it just struck me as sort of an upside down kind of thing, to think about how it's easier for men in the photography world to connect than it is for the women. I'm just making that observation. I'm wondering what comes up for you.
I think some of it has to do with, it's just a numbers game. And I think I mentioned that on Matt's podcast, is the same reason there's the whole STEM focus in schools to get women, girls interested in the sciences. And a lot of people come to photography from an engineering background. Like, if you join a photo club, at least in my area, and my area could be unique because there's a lot of tech industry in my area, but I don't want to say almost everyone, a vast majority of members were previous engineers or scientists of some sort. And I do have that in my background, but I feel like I come from photography as a creative pursuit.
Yeah.
So I understand the technology, but once I understand it, it's boring to me.
Yeah.
So I need more.
Right.
And I just think that, so back to your question about women in community, I ended up joining a couple photo clubs in my area and found a few other women. And then we just started doing things outside of the club. And one of the clubs I'm not a member of anymore, because I'm like, okay, what am I really getting out of this? And it's like, okay, I already found my female photographer friends. So, and we go out and do things all the time, but I think we have a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a different reason for doing it, perhaps. Yeah, I feel like my brain is a good 50-50 split between technology and creative side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I fit in both worlds pretty easily, but I get bored from the technology side if that's all I'm doing.
Yes. Yeah. I completely resonate with that and feel
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for going down that little detour.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know if I really answered your question, but
Well, I'm not sure what my question was. It was,
okay.
yeah. So that's totally fair. But it actually brings us a little bit to the question that I wanted to ask you about something that was part of your bio. Well, yeah, because when you're talking about engineers, and something just clicked for me, because it seems like as I talk to more and more photographers and get to know them beyond just the Instagram feed, I hear and see a lot of them referring to themselves as introverts. And when you talk about, coming from an engineering or a IT background, those are also a lot of introverts,
Absolutely.
not to, sweep a broad generalization, but there's just some professions that have a disproportionate number of people who identify that way. And in your bio, you write that some people may think that I hide behind the camera, but I feel that I experience the world in a much more intimate way when I am creating a composition in my viewfinder. And when I read that, I thought that resonates with me from an introvert perspective. And because I notice sometimes I actually kind of do hide behind the camera a bit, but I also use it and see it as a conduit to more meaningful connection with people and places around me. So I'm wondering for you, how does the camera and photography facilitate that connection and intimacy for you?
Well, one thing is when I'm looking through the viewfinder, it's eliminating all the distractions. And so there's a level of mindfulness and meditation. It's sometimes when I'm really into, this is especially true with macro. I don't do macro all the time, but especially true with macro. It's a very singular focus, and I feel like it actually allows my brain to relax because I'm not trying to juggle 1,000 things all at once. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is, I'm always trying to think creatively. It's like, I don't look at the subject and say, okay, I just want a picture of this flower, let's say. It's like, okay, what is it that's unique about this flower? How can I make a photograph of it that is not like all the other photos of this flower that you see like in an ID guide or something like that? Is there something about the shape of the flower, about the colors, about just striations of color, about the leaves, about the back of the flower? I'm always asking what else, what if, why, trying to better understand the subject, but also relate it to something else. Like, so it has like a meta meaning to it. I don't always do that. Sometimes it's just a pretty flower.
Yes.
And that's fine. It's absolutely fine. But I went through a phase where I had printed out some just colorful backdrops that I could bring out with me, because in my area, I do have wildflowers, but they're like onesie twosie, and then surrounded by dry grass or weeds or something that makes it difficult to photograph. So I carried around some 8x10 cardstock that I had printed out with different colors, some not natural colors at all. I had like a teal color, a turquoise, a purple, and I would just bring that around and put it behind the flowers to get just a different look, because I didn't want to pick the flower, but it kind of allowed me to bring something else into the field and photograph it differently.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think I've done that in my own backyard, like, with flowers that I bought at the farmer's market or something like that. But I haven't like gone so far as to take the background with me to a location.
Yeah.
And that's an awesome idea.
But I mean, I think back to your question about how does it facilitate intimacy? For me, it's just, I think it's the removing distractions.
Yeah.
of everything else around, and just allowing my mind to focus. I was on a camping trip once with friends, and I just took my camera out and found a flower, and spent 2 hours photographing this flower. And I come back and then I go, what'd you photograph? I'm like, a flower. For 2 hours? Yes. Yes.
Well, and that's when it becomes, I think you used the word meditative before.
Yeah.
That's when it crosses over from just that taking a snapshot, ooh, isn't that pretty, to something that is more meaningful, where what was coming up for me was that you are looking to kind of capture the essence of what it is you're looking at.
Yes.
And that takes more than 5 minutes.
A lot more, actually. Yeah.
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 And for some people, it takes years, if they're going back to a location. And
for sure. Yes. When I'm thinking, and sometimes I spend 2 hours with a flower. I'm like, nope, still didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'll try again next year when it blooms.
Yes, because it will bloom again.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I also appreciate that idea of removing distractions. And I think that maybe, again, because I used to play in the sandbox of introvert land, sometimes, I'm hearing things through that filter, and I'm thinking about how we strive to kind of reduce our cognitive load, reduce stimulation in a lot of different situations, especially if there's a lot of stimulation. And no wonder so many of us are drawn to photography, because it does offer that way of filtering out distractions, as you so well put it. So you've alluded to some plot twists in your background. I know you come from, as we learned in the intro, there's a software engineer, massage therapist, English teacher, photo restoration artist. There's all these plot twists that you've had on your journey. What would you say is the thread maybe that runs through all of those, and that feeds into, like, they're all a river that, feeds into who you are now as a photographer?
I think it's just a curiosity about life. I'm a lifelong learner. My mom was always a lifelong learner. I remember growing up, she took flower arranging courses. She took Chinese cooking class. She learned how to horseback ride. And I think that I just picked up on that. I've always just really enjoyed learning. And so all of those, I mean, obviously you have to go through school to learn engineering and stuff, but everything, and I went through school to be a massage therapist. And why I went from one to the other, I think at the time, the reason that I stopped engineering, why I left that job, was that I was feeling like, okay, I had been an engineer, I'd been a project manager, and I had been a product manager, which was marketing. I'm like, okay, they're different jobs, but they're also all the same. I need something else. And so massage therapy? I don't know why I chose that.
Well, it strikes me as sort of almost opposite,
It was crazy making, because at the time, so I basically went half-time at my job and then did massage school in the evenings. At the job, we were going through all sorts of sensitivity training for men and women working together. And it's like everybody was afraid to look at each other the wrong way. And then I'm massaging naked bodies at night.
Wow, that's even more opposite than I was thinking. But it's absolutely
it was very weird.
Yeah. Talk about cognitive dissonance, like having to rearrange the neurons.
So, I mean, and in some ways that made it easier when I finally decided to leave the engineering, because of that cognitive dissonance. It was obvious that I needed a change.
Yeah.
But it was a bit crazy making at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I had to, when I left that job, I left a consistent salary, health insurance. At the time, health insurance was kind of dependent on being employed, and it was yeah, I kind of took a leap of faith.
Yeah. Yeah. I suspect you've taken many leaps of faith over the past however many years. How have all of those leaps kind of informed where you consider yourself to be right now?
Well, one is that I feel fear and I do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Just recently, I had a health diagnosis that had me a little bit scared for like 2 weeks. And nothing has changed, but I realized I was not used to living in fear.
Yeah.
And that I didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to figure out a way to live my life and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Not being stupid about it, but I don't want to say I've never felt fear. I felt fear all my life. But I do it anyway. But this felt crushing in some ways. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, nope, I'm good. I can't stop doing what I love because of fear. I can't do it. So I will move forward.
Yeah. You said something very important that I just want to ground, which is like feel the fear and do it anyway. And I think that it's a Mark Twain quote. There's probably a Mark Twain quote for everything, but something about courage isn't absence of fear, but mastery over fear. Something along those lines. And that fear is just a natural human response. And it tells us like we care, there's something that's important that's happening that deserves our attention, but it doesn't necessarily mean it deserves to have the power.
Exactly.
Well, I hope that...
Did I answer that question?
I think, sometimes the conversation goes and I'm like, what was the original question? What did I ask? And
I'm not trying to evade anything, but all of a sudden I get this idea and I just...
It's okay. Because sometimes it's like the original question doesn't matter because what matters is wherever we went with it. Right. And so I'd have to go back and see, it's like the plot twists and what's the thread and how does that feed into your photography? And you answered it, at least you, I don't know if I'd like to say answer because that sounds so definitive. You offered a response.
There you go.
You offered a response that's true for you right now, which is feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a through line that has been there from your days of software engineer all the way through all these leaps of faith into where you are now and even putting on this conference. That's the first time for you all, correct? Am I right about that?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And
I had no idea what I was getting into.
Right?
I should have asked a few questions first.
Yep. Well, what were those questions you said you live by before? What if?
Why not? Why not? Yeah. What else?
So you're living them, which is cool, and that's an example for all of us. So I'm glad that came up again because that's a point that I think all of us, we can hear it and hear it and hear it and still not necessarily absorb it. It takes some time, and finally we hear it at the moment we're ready to hear it.
Exactly,
and it makes a difference. So I would love for us to look at some images now.
Oh, and, yes, let's do that.
Let's. This is a photography podcast after all. I know. So let's do that. On this show, we like to talk about pivot pixels, and these are images that are, in some way, they might not represent a particular pivot in a moment in time. They might just be representative of a body of work that is representing an evolution. But I would love to hear about what pivots you've noticed over the years, and maybe starting with this first one, this wildlife shot. So what can you tell us about this?
This is I just think it's a funny story, so I wanted to include it. So for some reason, I had never had a wildlife lens. I decided I'm going to get a 150 to 600 lens. So I get my lens. And I put it on my camera and I bring it up to Rocky Mountain National Park. And the most amazing display of these bighorn sheep running through sheep lakes. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I'm taking just blasting photos. And I get home, all of them are blurry because all of them, because I did not know that you just couldn't put it on auto and take pictures. I did not realize that when you're at 600 millimeters, that your shutter speed, if you want to freeze motion, is really important to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, kind of messed that up, but I did say, okay, I need to figure this out. So I took a class and I learned all about shutter speed and how 1 over your focal length, that's your minimum. But if you've got animals moving, you're going to want it a lot higher than that, and da-da-da-da. Okay. So I do that. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have to use a really high ISO, like way higher than I was used to. And now to be able to get that really fast shutter speed, right? So now all of my photos are really noisy because the camera that I had at the time was not great with noise. So then I had to buy a new camera.
Of course.
And then I'm out there and I'm like, gosh, this ball head, this tripod it's not stable at all. So then I had to buy a whole new tripod and a gimbal head. And I was like, oh, this one lens that was supposed to be reasonable, which it was, but it caused an awful lot of additional purchases.
Exactly. The advancements of one thing highlight the limitations of another.
So this was all technology and equipment based, but isn't that true of just life in general and the way you look at things? I mean, that's a really profound statement.
Yeah. And so it sounds like in addition to noticing your relationship to your equipment and what it could do for you, what it couldn't do for you, it sounds like this was also something of an entree into some wildlife photography.
For sure. Yeah.
And enjoying that as an aspect of your work.
Yes. Part of that has just been backyard birds. Put out a feeder and see what birds come in, what time of the year, and how they act in super cold weather. It's made just looking out my kitchen window so much more interesting, even if I'm not taking a photo, just to learn the behavior of the birds. And then when I'm out taking pictures of other wildlife, just again, learning behavior. It's again, all the lifelong learning. It's like, and the curiosity is like, okay, now why are they doing that? I didn't see him doing that last year, or anything really. I just like learning about new things. And then I feel like when you learn more, you're more connected to it.
Yes. Yeah.
So this definitely inspired, so far, a passion for wildlife photography. I wouldn't say that I'm a great wildlife photographer, but it brings me joy. And so that's enough.
That's what it's all about. And wildlife photography is hard. That's at least what I've experienced. Like I was in Florida and we were on one of these little shoreline cruise boat things. And of course there were birds and things like that. And I had my camera and I thought, I'll try to capture some. It was really hard.
You're on a moving boat.
I know. It's like, well, of course I was not, in the most conducive, but it increased my appreciation for I already was in awe of people that do that, but it even more, elevated, because until you try it, you think, oh, I could do that.
Especially birds when they move around a lot. I mean, I can't tell you how often I practice, look at something, bring the camera up so that I know where to bring the camera, so that when you're at 600 millimeters, trying to find that bird off in the distance can be really tough. So even just practicing the hand-eye motion coordination is important.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole set of skills and developing also, I would think, intuition. So you have your knowledge, but also like you get to know the animal's movements, perhaps enough to be able to anticipate, like if they're doing this,
100%.
it's possible this is going to be their next move. And so I'm going to be the Wayne Gretzky, I don't skate where the puck has been, I skate where it's going.
Yep.
It seems like that's the same for wildlife photography.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Well, I love that this one is in here because I think it's the first time somebody's brought a pivot pixel where it's like, I was excited about this. I wanted to work and it didn't work.
It totally didn't work.
But it ignited something.
Yeah.
That led to a lot of unexpected rewards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. This one is so cool. If anybody's listening, I'm going to guess it's an outdoor tree that's has Christmas lights on it.
Yes.
And it's very abstracted. So yeah, tell us about the story of this one.
So I love Christmas lights, but I get bored. After a while, you're like, how else can I capture these lights in a way that looks interesting? I realized that my macro lens has focus breathing. And so that means that it appears to zoom in and out depending on the focal plane. And so I can focus it on, let's say, the lights of the tree. And I'm doing a long exposure, but it's on a tripod. And then I focus on the lights of the tree. I wait a second, and then I move the focus ring out of focus. It's 100 millimeter. It's not a zoom, but it creates this, I call it the aura tree because it looks like the aura of the tree to me.
Yeah.
And it's a particular feature. I call it a feature of this lens. I don't know whether everybody would call it a feature, but it happens with this lens. And it's not the only lens that it happens with, but I couldn't tell you what other lenses do it. I've also have a version of this where I stopped it. I would move the focus ring and pause, and it is more like small to large dots. And I call that one the fairy tree because it looks more like fairies to me.
Yeah.
But this was just, I went through a whole phase of figuring out how I could capture Christmas lights using the photographic process. And so using bokeh, this is essentially going from, in focus to bokeh, but in a smooth motion. There was one time I was using, I think they're called bokeh filters, where I have a machine that will cut shapes out of cardstock, and then I cut it in a circle so I could just put it right on the front of my lens, and then you put everything out of focus, and now all of your round bokeh shapes are now whatever shape that you cut out of your cardstock. So I could do like, I don't know, stars, and I don't even know, like even trees, like little, Christmas trees or geometric kind of stuff. I did one with a spiral. Anyway, that was all just to create abstract things with Christmas lights because there's just so many different colors and fun you can have. So this is just representative of trying to be creative with what my camera can do instead of just here's a picture of this subject or object.
Yeah.
How can I make it creative?
Yeah. You're inviting us not to take something at face value and see what's underneath it. And is this a single exposure? Yeah. You said it was a long, wow. Okay. Because and is this one where you use that bokeh filter?
I did not use a bokeh filter on this.
Okay.
Nope. It was just the focus breathing of the lens that created the glare, if you will.
Yeah, that is so cool. And when you said that before, like it's a feature, I thought, well, one person's bug is another person's feature.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I love that. And I'm curious because I have one that's collecting dust up in my closet that I need to get back out again. But did you use like a Cricut? I think that's
I think mine's the brother version of a Cricut, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for anybody who doesn't know what that is, if you're a craft geek, it's
exactly.
It's basically the machine you can feed cardstock into and you program it to cut out different shapes.
Yeah.
It's yeah, you could get really creative with it. And I love that application of that. So glad you brought that up, because like I said, mine is collecting dust, and it's like, I don't even remember if I know how to use it, but I need to get it back out again.
There you go. Now you have a reason. You can
I
use it with your
know.
photography.
You've inspired me. I love it. Yes. Okay, so this one is so cool, and it looks like we're seeing a time lapse for anybody who's just listening. But yeah, tell us about this image.
I feel like there's a couple things about this image. One is that I feel like I used my background in quilting to create the slices of this. So this is what's called a time slice photo. And most of the time when you see these, it is a time lapse. You take time lapse from day to night, and then most people just do vertical slices.
Right.
But the problem was, when I did that with this image, all the color in that upper left-hand corner was gone in the first two slices. And I'm like, well, but that was the interesting part of this, right? So it's like, how do I get it? So I actually used Adobe Illustrator to create the map of the slices that I wanted to use. And then I was able to bring those in and use masking and Photoshop to pull out the slices that enhanced seeing the color of the sunset, but also enhanced on the right-hand side, the Christmas lights against that dark blue sky. Yeah. And so I feel like, one, it was kind of, I don't know that I would have thought of that if I wasn't a quilter prior to that, and creating my own designs and using the Cricut to cut out special shapes for applique or whatever. It just like, well, I can do that digitally too. And so that was part of it. And the other thing is that I don't do a lot of them, but I have a fascination with time lapse and being able to portray the passage of time in a single image. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Obviously, long exposure, any long exposure will show the scene in front of you in a way that's different from the way your eyes are seeing it. But in this case, because of the color in those sunset clouds that only occurred on the left-hand side of the frame, it's like, okay, I want to include that because that was part of my whole experience while I was standing there. Time slices. There's also time stacks, which is you take a series of time-lapsed images and you stack them and then blend them with, let's see, what is it in Photoshop? There's different ways of blending. You can average, you can do a median, but it can create some really interesting clouds if clouds are moving in the sky. And I've done that. I just like playing with time and displaying it differently.
Yeah. And it's so funny you said the word play, because just as you were describing that, I thought you're playing. And that's a word, and I'm going to do a podcast about that word and that concept in just a bit. But to what degree do you feel like you play in order to discover these new ways of putting images together?
Oh gosh. I mean, I'm hesitating because when I'm doing it for myself, I allow myself to play. When I'm doing it because I think other people might see it, I don't play as much. If I feel like it's going to be judged in some way. So I've worked hard over the years when I first started out, it was all play, it was all experiment, and I was just learning the craft. I was part of a photo challenge, and every week in this particular challenge, the topics weren't just go take a picture of a color or go take a picture of a subject. It was a lot. It was very technique driven. So I learned a lot of techniques. And this time slice was one of this particular one was not one of the first ones I did, but the concept of that I learned in the photo challenge. And that was all play for me. And in fact, I would joke sometimes if I could turn my photo challenge, the topic for the week, into a science experiment, that just made me super happy because like we had to do water drops one time. And I was like, I did not have flash at the time. So I'm like trying to shine all these shop lights on the water drop. And I'm like, why can't I get a high enough shutter speed? Did not realize how much light a flash puts out, you know? But that was all play. I'm really grateful for that time because I have that to look back on. And then when I started to get serious, I'm like, oh, well, I'm supposed to be doing it this way, or I should be doing it this way. And that took the joy out of it for a bit until I realized that I wasn't having fun anymore and that I needed to bring that back in.
Yeah.
I just love experimenting. For me, it's like 80 to 90% about the process and 10 to 20% about the image that I end up with.
Yeah. And it sounds like if it's not fun, it's not fulfilling.
Now, fun or challenging. I love a technical challenge.
Well, that's that engineer.
Exactly.
Brain.
It does. I mean, I do, while just being, taking technical photos is boring. I do not like technology to win. And so I will figure out a way of
it's a battle.
Yeah. And, I cannot say that all of my photos that I've ended up with that I'm happy with were necessarily fun during the process. But if I learned something, then that was fun too.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of times when I'm just pulling out my hair. It's like, why isn't this working?
Yeah. Just
had one like trying to stitch together an Aurora photo. I did a pano, and I'm like, for some reason it just was like whoop, and I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah. But you're like we were saying before with a fear.
Yeah.
Fear. And so is frustration, right? So frustration and fun sometimes might be on the same side of the coin. And if you can work through 100%. Frustration,
yes.
Look what awaits you.
Yes.
And I want to also just, before we move on to other images and questions, one of the things that I love as a through line through this podcast is this idea of creativity cross-training, which is a phrase I'm riffing off of from Colleen Minnick.
Yep.
And when you talked about, because of your experience in quilting, that's part of how you were able to envision this and shift it. So I'm curious about like how else maybe the other creative endeavors that you do show up in how you photograph or how you process.
Well, one thing that I used to do in quilting that I have not for a bit, but I want to get back into it, is printing on alternative substrates. So in quilting, I was printing on fabric. And there were some amazing quilters that were doing digital imagery and then printing it, let's say, on cotton, but also printing it on a silk chiffon, which is transparent, and then layering the two, but not securing that silk chiffon on top so that as people walked past, it would kind of move. Cool. And I just think that that's fascinating.
Yeah.
To print image. And then, I mean, we already know about printing on metal and that sort of thing, but the different things that you can put images on now, and whether it's something that's going through your printer or you put it on some sort of transfer paper. I did one where I printed an image on a transfer that could be put on the back of glass, and I created these, and I got some plain clear glass plates, and I figured out how to transfer my images to the back of a plate, which was fascinating. Wow. I mean, it's just cool. I haven't done that in a while. That was back when I had the business in quilting and was trying to come up with, and crafting, and trying to come up with new ways of using these images that people were creating with our software, which was a kaleidoscope or mandala style design. What else can you do with it? Because people were like, okay, I did this, but now what?
Now what? Yeah.
So I got to play with all sorts of different things.
Yeah. Oh, how fun. How fun.
To come up with different ideas. So I have all of that in my background. So I come at photography from a very creative background, because for 12 years, I was kind of like the person who was trying to come up with all these ideas of what else can I do with the software? What else can I do with the software?
Mm-hmm.
And showing people how to do that. And that just translates into my photography. Again, what else?
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm trying to take a picture of something I am not going to stand here and say that I never take a picture of what I'm looking at, right?
Right.
Vast majority of my images are that. But when I get to a point where I'm like, what I'm seeing on the back of my camera is not what I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Then I think, okay, what's my toolbox? What do I have in my toolbox that I can use to help me photograph this in a different way?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just grateful that I have all of those experiences to fall back on so that I know and then have the confidence like, okay, I can figure this out. I've done it before. I can figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, you saying that makes me think of, I know we use the phrase, feel the fear and do it anyway, which is the title of a book.
Yeah.
Susan Jeffers. And I just remember that and have it at the tip of my tongue because it was like one of the very first self-help books that I ever read. And it was extraordinarily powerful for me at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that she talks about is the reason we feel fear is because we fear we can't handle whatever happens. And
Yes.
So one of the mantras is, I can handle whatever happens. And I just heard you share a variation on that, like that confidence that I can figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
So important.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm curious about is advice you've gotten, because there's no shortage of advice in the photography world. and curious if you have any best or worst advice that you've received that's made some sort of impact on your photography.
So what's interesting is what I'm going to tell you is not necessarily advice that was given to me. It was advice that I received while watching a video.
Got it.
Back when I was, deep in the throes of just trying to learn the craft of photography, I watched a bunch of videos on the B&H event space. Mm-hmm. And Eileen Rafferty, I was particularly drawn to. And in one of her videos, she told a story of being out photographing with one of her friends. They come back and her friend says, I don't understand. What do you do? What do you do when you take photos? Because your photos look so different from mine. And Eileen's response was, I look for the light. Mm. And that has stuck with me for 8 years now? Mm-hmm. It really makes me realize, one, that the subject is not as important as the lighting on that subject. And you can make a really boring thing look fascinating mm-hmm. in the right kind of light. And this isn't necessarily, I am not talking about studio lighting. I dabble in that and I'm terrible at it. But but this is more like being out in nature. If you're in a forest, you know how you get that spotlight on certain things that can just make a tiny piece of moss just glow, or a little tiny tree growing on a mossy log. You know, it's like, okay, this is the whole cycle of life that you have here, but the ray of light's coming right down on that one little tiny tree, or a flower being backlit. Yeah. We do have a photo of this. What was interesting was this photo was part of the photo challenge that I was mentioning before. And I think the challenge was to not do any post-processing. And so I came up with 2 photos. One was, I thought the composition was better, and one I thought the lighting was better. I can't say that I didn't do processing on this. I totally did processing on this. Maybe because I did processing after the fact. Anyway.
Yeah, straight out of camera to them, but then playing with it.
Yeah, I think that when I posted it for the challenge, I didn't, but this is clearly processed. But anyway, my point was the one that I thought had the better composition
Mm-hmm.
was just kind of even lighting. And this one obviously is backlit.
Mm-hmm.
And when people responded to it, everyone chose this one as their favorite by far. And it made me realize how important lighting can be. I mean, this is just, I want to say just a backlit flower, but it was probably close to midday.
Mm-hmm.
But it was in someone's garden, and it was just surrounded by all these other flowers, which when you do obviously a shallow depth of field, then you get this dreamy bokeh. And I think this was one of the first times when I really applied the look for the light and was like, oh, now I get it. And
Now
I'm
I
not
get
saying composition isn't important, but
Mm-hmm.
I think you can have the best composition in the world, but if the lighting is boring, it's not going to make that photograph sing.
Yeah.
Conversely, you can have the best lighting in the world, and if the composition sucks, well, it still isn't a great photo.
Right.
So
There's a
I have a
convergence.
hard time saying one is better than the other. I think you
Yeah.
really need both. But
Mm-hmm.
what it made me realize is how lighting can really help people interact with, first of all, notice the photo.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about the colors of sunset or anything. This obviously has no sunset colors in it.
Yeah.
It's unique lighting.
Yeah. And weird thoughts come into my mind as I hear you. And this is dating me, but I'm thinking of Poltergeist, where they say, don't go into the light. And instead, this is a go into the light. This is the opposite of that.
But
Yeah.
also, light creates shadow.
Yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes the shadow is what is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, I'm thinking about immediately the image, like when you said an ordinary or, an unspectacular scene, but that light makes it. I am embarrassed that I cannot remember the photographer, but it's a famous photo of someone on an airplane. It's like maybe from the 60s or 70s. And it's just a coffee cup. And the way the light is coming through the window and casting a shadow, and it's sort of warm. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know what you're talking about, but I can imagine what's happening with that light and the shadow.
And it's not a coffee cup. It's actually like a cocktail, I think. It's like a glass.
Oh, yeah.
And
you get the color on, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it is an ordinary scene, but it's because of the light shaping it into something that is quite magical. When you think about it, especially if you go sort of meta, kind of like what you're saying, like, wow, okay, this person they're flying, like if you imagine they're flying through the air and here it is, just this glass. Yeah. But anyway, your point about following the light, that is very important advice.
And so now when I am out taking photos, and obviously if I'm looking for wildlife, I'm looking for a subject, right? But
sure.
But when I'm doing intimate landscapes in particular, I am looking for how the light is falling on the landscape. I'm not looking at the landscape per se. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Well, the light becomes the subject.
Yes.
In those cases. And so I kind of take away from this, like, don't dismiss an ordinary scene right away. Start looking for other things, and especially light.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. All of this is like, every time I have one of these conversations, like it makes me itch to get out with my camera. Like, I got to go do these things.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, we haven't really, one thing we haven't touched on that I know is a thing that comes up for folks is feeling kind of stuck or experiencing kind of blocks where they're feeling sort of blah and not finding inspiration, like everything looks mundane and they're not able to see the light, for instance. How do you move through times like that for yourself?
Creative blocks. Whew. So first of all, I give myself grace. This too shall pass.
Yeah.
Or if it doesn't pass, it will morph into a new way of being, that that becomes now a stasis, and I can get my creative mojo back.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm under a ton of stress, I tend not to feel very creative. So I just allow that.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
Yeah, go with it.
And then the other thing is that we've already talked about is just do something for the pure joy of it,
Yeah.
the fun of it. Don't worry about producing anything that's worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Do it because you enjoy it. And it may lead to something else. It may not, but it doesn't matter. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is to think back on, okay, when I wasn't this stressed, what did I do? What did I used to enjoy doing that just brought me joy, and fall back on that?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's going way back. Maybe that's just going back to the technology, because that's the comfortable side of my brain.
Yeah.
The side that's a little bit easier, and being okay with that. Maybe it's getting a new piece of equipment.
Right.
You know, I don't usually advocate gear acquisition syndrome, but
gas.
yeah. I think that just getting a new piece of gear does not guarantee better photos.
Right.
But
agree.
It can create learning opportunities, which I find fun.
Mm-hmm.
It can, like, I don't have a lens baby.
I was just thinking about lens babies. Yes.
But I think if I were to get stuck again, I would look at that.
Yep.
It's a different way of looking at the world.
Yep.
Just something that helps you see the world differently.
Yeah.
And that could be a different focal length.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As simple as that. Even if you're not a wildlife photographer, getting a 100 to 400 and zooming in. I mean, my absolute favorite lens is my 100 to 500.
Like you, I don't want to fall into gear acquisition syndrome and gear envy.
Right.
100 to 500 is something that is like on my list.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the lens babies, because that has, for me, been one of those ways I've broken through sometimes those ruts. And it's basically just introducing something that sort of forces me to see things differently. Like I have no choice because of the way they're engineered.
Yes. And then figuring out, okay, how am I going to use this in a way that still has my vision? Yeah.
Yeah. And what might it reveal that I didn't expect?
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't think you can answer that question without playing.
Yeah. Back to that again. Yeah. Exactly.
You have to allow yourself to not be attached to the outcome and to love the process.
Yeah. Yeah. You just picked up on two of my favorite mantras: trust the process and I'm open to outcome, not attached.
Yeah, exactly.
which can be so hard when we, what I've found, and please, share your own experience, is like the better I get at something, the harder it is to let go and play, because I have an expectation that I can produce something useful, meaningful, shareable, sellable. And so letting go of saying this has to result in something. I know intellectually how important that is and all of that. But then emotionally, I find myself getting caught up in, I have to produce something.
Yeah. One thing for me is that I'm not doing photography professionally. I have sold photos. People ask me, and yes, I will sell my photo. But I don't have that pressure of having to produce. And that's actually on purpose.
Yeah.
So it's perhaps easier for me to play. But I think that if someone is in a situation where they're making money from their photography, and that is their sole source of income, I still think it's important to give yourself play dates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you have to exercise your creative side in order to keep that active. And, if just taking an afternoon a week or a month or whatever it is isn't enough, then consider giving yourself 5 days off at a retreat by yourself or with friends, but just something that allows the everyday constant stress to kind of fall into the background. And I know for me, when I've been super stressed, it usually takes 2-3 days for that to kind of fall into the background and allow me to really be present.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's available, if that's an option for everyone, but I do find that trying to fit that in is important. I mean, even in academic settings, people take sabbaticals all the time.
Yes.
There's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have to step away from the insanity, the stimulation, the cognitive load that we've been carrying.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you, not everybody can take that sort of step back for multiple days or whatever. And I think of it as kind of how we might think of working out. Well, if I can't do it for an hour every day, then what's the point? If I can't take a sabbatical for 2 weeks, what's the point? Well, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, one day, half a day, whatever you can make work is going to have some benefit if you're doing it with intention and doing it in a way that doesn't add to stress, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so you mentioned, and this is a good segue into how I wanted to kind of close our conversation, which is hearing a little bit more about the conference. But you mentioned that retreat that you took with other folks and how that was part of maybe the seeds of what this conference is about. So I know that the speakers have been announced for a little while, but topics are starting to come in. So what can somebody who's attending the conference in Colorado in February expect? One
of the big things for us is just connection with other people. The retreat that we had was, I think it was 5 days or maybe it was 6 days and 5 nights. But I knew my sister was also there. She's a photographer. So she and I knew each other. And then 2 other people knew each other. And they had met briefly at a conference in person. And then so we all knew the person who kind of organized it. That was the link that we had. And photography, that was the other link that we had. The other thing was, and possibly was what made it magical, although I like to think it was the women who made it magical, is that it was right after all the lockdowns from COVID. So it was very much needed, that connection piece. And I am very introverted. I'm not shy, but I'm introverted. I need my alone time. And I was shocked to discover that I didn't need any alone time that entire week.
Wow. You were with the right people then.
Yeah. But I had warned them. I said, if I go lock myself in the room, please understand it's me and it's not you.
Exactly.
Just being able to set boundaries like that, to let people know, okay, this is a boundary for me and it's me, it's not you. And
exactly.
Anyway, back to the conference. We had such an awesome connection with each other that we were like, gosh, it'd be great if other women could have this as well. And how could we provide a setting for that? And so we came up with this idea of the in-person conference, because there's so much is online now because of, with COVID, and it makes it easy and it's cheaper. Yes, all of that. And I've never had conversations online like I did in person.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. Second, I think I know our speakers are going to give all of us things to think about. Just like when you have conversations with your guests, you're always picking up something. I mean, no matter if you know who these instructors are, they're still going to have insights that you pick up and you're like, oh. So like I said, the advice that I got was not given to me directly. I received it, but it completely changed the way that I did photography. So that's our hope with all of the speakers. We've asked them to speak on inspirational topics and some of the photography craft, but their philosophy behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly you're going to learn photography, but more from a philosophical point of view than a technical point of view.
Yeah.
Except on the last day, we will have some technical post-processing stuff. Because a lot of people said that they wanted that. We did a survey and they said they wanted that. Yeah. So that the last day we will get into some technical stuff. Yeah, I'm very excited about the speakers that we have. And you can go to the website and find that out. I could list them all, but would you like me to?
Well, I remember Victoria Hack and Sarah Marino.
Yeah.
And Franca
Gabler.
Gabler. Sorry, Franca.
Or Gobbler. I think sorry, Franca.
Remind us of a few more.
Okay, yeah. So Charlotte Gibb.
Yes.
Sherry Mabe, who is a Colorado photographer and does infrared. Suzanne Mathia. She'll be giving the technical post-processing stuff. Michelle Sons. Jen Walton, who is a storm chaser. So I'm very excited to learn about her journey. Dawn Wilson is a wildlife photographer. Beth Young. And then the three of us will also be giving presentations.
Awesome. That is like an all-star lineup. That is so
We
cool.
like to think so.
I think it is. I totally think it is.
They're all very excited. We're super excited they're coming, and they're all excited about the conference.
Yeah.
But I think, if people are, listening to the presentations, what I'm hoping is that they can reflect on what motivates them, because I think a lot of the instructors will talk about what motivates them, right? So then you can start to think about, as an attendee, what is it that motivates me?
Yes.
And what are my intrinsic motivations? So like I already said earlier, like for me, it's all about process and not as much about the final image. I'm not saying that's the right way. But that's what makes me happy. How to be more mindful, and I really don't like the term finding your voice. I struggled with that for so long. I think but finding, like I said, what is your motivation? That then becomes your voice.
Right.
I think that for me, it's an easier way of listening to it, because finding your voice ends up a lot of times translating into some weird post-processing tricks.
Well, and it also seems like you find it and you're done.
Okay. That's another discussion, Beth.
Part 2 to be coming soon. Yeah.
But I think the only other thing I wanted to say about the conference is that I would really encourage women to attend, simply to realize they're not alone. They're not alone with their fears. They're not alone with the self-doubt. They're not alone with the negative self-talk or the family obligations, all of the stuff that is part of life. It's just that some photographers have figured out how to do it in spite of all those things.
Yeah.
And I think it's incredibly difficult to find discussions about that online.
Yeah.
It's much easier in person.
Yeah. Yeah. You can watch a YouTube video to figure out the technical aspects of so many things. And yes, having hands-on in person helping you with it is valuable, but those philosophical questions, the motivation, the why, I completely agree that that's a much more dynamic and personal exploration that benefits from exactly what you all are putting together.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful for your vision of being able to pull that together and getting so many, like I said, like a star-studded lineup of women who are really, I'm sure, going to be generous with their
We
insight.
have asked them to be available when they're not talking, just to
good. Don't go hide in your hotel room.
No, if they're presenting it out of Chicago live, then they'll have to go hide for a little bit. But
yeah, exactly. We'll let them go do that.
But in general,
otherwise. Yeah. Yeah. That's the other thing is like you get that more access in a very supportive space.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, what a gift. And so we will absolutely share links to the conference
Great. Thanks.
in the show description, and folks
and then
can
the discount
have a
code
discount code.
Yep.
I think it's Pixels 100,
Yes.
but we'll make sure that it's right, and I'll include it. So thank you for that piece of generosity as well.
Of course.
When do registrations close?
Well, the discount ends at the end of 2024.
Okay.
I don't know that. Well, I don't think we have an actual date for closing.
Just come on down. We'll take you at the door.
Might have to share food, but
but we'd love to encourage people, like, go ahead and get on board. And, I know for me, like, especially having something to look forward to in the doldrums of February.
Yes.
So much healthier for my mindset when I have something like that.
I would also like to mention, we did a webinar on winter photography, on all about different ideas for winter photography, how to stay warm, how to stay safe. And that's on our YouTube channel. But just to get people excited, because there's so much to photograph in the winter.
Yeah. And I've been to Colorado only to fly into the airport and see the demon horse. Which was just shocking. But anyway, but I've not been to, really Colorado, like the way that this is going to be. So it's going to be beautiful, I'm sure. And so to close out, one of the things I'm going to be starting to ask guests in that spirit of generosity and really building community is, you mentioned many photographers that are going to be there at the conference. And so I know that there are lots of folks on your radar that inspire you, but I'm wondering if there's anyone in particular you would like to share that is inspiring, that has some certain resonance for you right now that we should know about.
Yes. So one of our speakers is Sherry Mabe, and she does infrared. And if about a year ago, I got an infrared converted camera. And prior to that, for like 5 years, I was using just a filter on a regular camera, which basically forces you to do super long exposures. I cannot tell you how much fun, there's that word again, I'm having with my converted camera. And so what's interesting, I think, about Sherry is that for years she is like, I am not connected to the plains of Colorado. She is very connected to the plains of Colorado. She has some beautiful imagery, and she has pictures of mountains too. But recently she went through a creative challenge and a creative block, and was trying to figure out what to do next, and got a lens baby with her infrared and went to a sculpture garden.
Wow.
And so I'm just finding those images fascinating that she's created with a lens, because I don't think I would have thought of necessarily putting a lens baby on infrared. Because right now, infrared is just, it's new enough that just the infrared is enough. But eventually,
you start stacking.
What else can I do?
Exactly. The what ifs start to stack, and before you know it, it's going to be a lens baby with a bokeh filter in the front.
Exactly.
And then it's going to be carrying a background with you, and who knows? Who knows? Endless. It's endless, right?
Right.
Yeah, very cool. Well, we will include her information and a link to that. So thank you for sharing. And and that reminds me, something I really wanted to squeeze in, even though I know we're going long, which was like a creative exercise or something that folks can do now that their future creative selves are going to thank them for. What would you recommend?
So one of the things that I did was 10 variations. This was an exercise one of my local groups was like, let's do 10 variations. So take a photo that you have processed and you already like it. How else can you process it? So this is a processing challenge, but I loved it because then it allowed me to play. It's like, okay, this is not what I should do. Here's what I could do.
Yes.
Great. And so inverted colors. I did mirroring. So if you want to bring that photo up, because it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that there's a photo that goes along with this. Oh, yes, there it is.
Yeah. If you look at this sideways, this is one image of sand caves outside of Kanab, Utah. But I'm like, what happens if I mirror this? And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't know if it's a little elephant or if I may not. People all say different things. But it's like one of my favorite photos ever.
Yeah.
And I already liked the first photo, but I love this photo.
Yeah. It's so intriguing.
Because it's so playful. But like there's if you do a search for creative exercises, even B&H, I found 13 creative exercises for photographers. And it's things like standing in one place and taking 20 photos, or limiting yourself to a certain focal length, or a certain number of photos. Like, okay, you go out, you're doing street photography, you get 12 photos. That's it.
Exactly.
For the day.
Yep.
But just exercises that limit you or give you ideas in some way.
Limitations are incredibly powerful in terms of helping us to expand. I mean, that's the paradox. To expand things, sometimes you have to limit them, and that really breaks things open. So I love that 10 variations exercise. And that's actually kind of a perfect exercise depending on where you live and how winter is for you and whether or not you do winter photography. It's like that perfect, rainy day, snowed in kind of activity to just start playing. So okay. I know we're going long. Thanks for everybody who's stuck with us. I hope it was worth it, but I just had to get in that question because I knew about that 10 variations that you had done that. And I thought, I hope she mentions that. So I'm so glad you brought that in. But thank you so much, Jeanie. It's been a great pleasure talking with you. How can, we'll include links, but really quickly, what's the best place for people to find you online?
I would say, as old fashioned as this is, Facebook. is where I tend to post most stuff. It's where I have friends from, my old quilting days. And so I like to post pictures for them there. So that's probably the most active. Okay. And then my website also. Right. But the newest stuff always ends up on Facebook first.
Excellent.
At this point. I'm working on it.
All right. Well, we will definitely share those links, and I hope folks reach out and connect with you. So, thank you again. I do sense a part 2 in our future at some point.
I would love that.
You're game for that. And, and best wishes for the conference. It's going to be fantastic. I know this.
We're very excited about it.
Yeah. It's going to be wonderful. And it's such a gift. And I hope that even, the men photographers recognize that, whenever women are getting together and learning something like this and getting empowered and confident, and it helps everyone. It raises the conversation for everybody. So, men are there in spirit and will benefit.
There will be a conference later on that will be a co-ed.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let us know in the comments what was most useful or meaningful to you, and be sure to subscribe so that you're notified of future episodes. This channel is made possible in part by Nature Photography classes and their Inspired Creator Grant. You can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspiredcreator. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.